Better?
This is annoying. Why won't my iPods... Hold on a second. So you just click on it, and they go. I don't know why it does this.
Yeah. Is that a kid or?
The door.
It's like from a haunted house. Is that where? Hey Joe, I'm gonna send you. There you are. Hey Joe, how you are? How's it going?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Just glad it's working.
No, all good. Sorry, I haven't used this in a while, so it was sort of a bit of a surprise to me when it was asking me for all these permissions and stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh no, no kidding, no kidding. So Joe, go ahead and mute yourself. We're gonna start here in a couple minutes, or probably less than a minute. And we'll come to you and Will eventually.
For sure, no worries at all.
Thanks. Do. All right, let's kick it off. Hello and welcome to U.S. Rugby Happy Hour Live. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy Hour Live brings you interviews with some of the biggest names in U.S. rugby scene. Today's show is a rare daytime show for us, for everybody actually in the spaces with us. We will be discussing the Rugby World Cup, which begins tomorrow, and we're pumped. We're going to discuss that with Joe Harvey and Will Hooley in just a few minutes. If you are listening live on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, you can leave comments or questions in those chats, or just join us over here on the Twitter mobile app, and you can ask your own questions directly to our guests live. Just look for the link on Eagles Overseas. Also, I believe you can now ask questions from a browser. Not 100% sure about that just yet, but give it a try. We'll see what happens. If you are not already following us, please do so at Eagles Overseas and Rugby Morning on most social media channels to get updates on future shows and news about USA Rugby, Major League Rugby, and much, much more Rugby World Cup stuff. I am Bill Baker of Eagles Overseas, and my co-host probably chowing down on a meatball sub for lunch, I think. Rugby Morning's John Fitzpatrick. Hey, Fitzy.
A meatball sub, Bill? Seriously?
I don't know.
I'm certainly down for one, but
well,
I'm trying to get fit and trim here.
For the season.
Yeah.
I'm going to be chowing down on a lobster roll in about an hour, as we do up here in the Boston area.
Oh my God! Typical.
Yeah, how's it going?
This is uncharted territory for us.
Yeah, midday. I'm a lot more awake. I'm not having a drink, although we are called Happy Hour. So if you're listening in the UK or France, that makes more sense. So I don't know. You can, Fitz. You can drink if you'd like. I know.
I'm on a cup of coffee number 3. I was up late last night. I had a fantasy football auction draft that went a little late. So.
Oh, nice. Well, I had my fantasy draft on Monday night, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to do it. Tough week for us out here. Just crazy. Just I don't know if I just want other people to know also out there that my daughter, who plays collegiate soccer, her senior year, unfortunately suffered a pretty nasty leg injury, and we were there. My wife and I were there to see it, and I tell you what, it wasn't fun to watch. She broke both the tibia and fibula. So tibia and fibula in her leg, and which is where they are. But the worst part about it, Fitzy, was unfortunately you can hear her across the field just in agony. I know, but it was so tough to do it, to listen to it, and usually parents don't go out there, but she was down for so long that I got up and I went down to the field. I know the coaches there pretty good too. So anyway, she's doing better. I spent the week up there, and I was prepared to do this show from like a Starbucks or something while I was up there, but didn't have to do that. Got home late last night, so ready to go for today. My daughter's doing better. Her pain has gone down quite a bit. She got a new cast yesterday, full leg cast. And she got it black because she wanted to be badass, but all good. But yeah, so with that said, man, actually, real quick before we get to our guests, dude, your Old Glory DC has a new home. Do you know much about it?
Yeah, the Maryland Soccerplex, just outside of the Beltway on the Maryland side. For those who are familiar with it, it's where National Collegiate Rugby held the Collegiate Rugby Championship this past spring. It's nice out there. Great facility. The stadium's nice grass field. It's a little bit closer to DC. I think it'll be a little bit easier to get to.
Yeah, good.
But exciting news for Old Glory. And I think the biggest thing is there's going to be a beer garden, a lot more of the rugby festival-like stuff that MLR clubs really need, that New England does so well.
Yeah.
You can do this at the Maryland Soccerplex. So exciting stuff.
That's great. And also one more bit of news before we move on. Women's Barbarians are returning this fall, and USA hooker JoJo Kitlinski is on the roster. I'm pumped for her. I'm glad that team started. Not old at all, and past Eagles have been on that team. Been Jess Wooden, Alicia Washington, Hope Rogers, just to name a few. There's been a handful of them, and I'm pumped for her. Can't wait to see that. And then later today, Bristol Bears, AJ McGinty is going against the Men Barbarians. I haven't found anywhere to watch that live, so I wish it was a live stream, but it's all good. Hopefully he goes well. Okay, Fitz, what do you say? Let's get into our guests.
Let's do it.
Let's talk some rugby like we do on this show once in a while. All right, making his long-awaited return to the show. I think we were on Clubhouse platform the last time he was on. Hailing from the United Kingdom, content producer and journalist Joe Harvey. Hey, Joe.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm just sort of, I imagine like Mr. Hooley is sort of baking slowly in the late English summer sun. But yeah, which to be fair is going to be indicative of the World Cup over the weekend. I mean, some places in France are going to hit 35 degrees Celsius, so I can't quite tell you what that is in Fahrenheit, but that is quite the heat to be playing rugby in. So yeah, I'm just sort of just enjoying a bit of the late day. I'm still at work in the office. I've just sort of nipped out around the corner into the car park and enjoying some of the sights.
Well, great. And also joining us, I believe he's also in the UK at the moment. I feel like we're introducing two boxers, like they're going to go at it. In the blue corner is USA Eagle number 517, recently retired from the game as well, and journalist himself, Will Hooley. Hey, Will.
Hey, Bill, and hey, Fitzy as well. Great to be on here. Hey, Joe. It's I'm in the UK at the moment, which is interesting. As Joe's mentioned, the weather is, I don't know, it's like we're having a late summer here. So yeah, it's we're not also very good at having hot weather. There's no air conditioning useful. So anyway, look, it's going to be, talking of hot weather, as Joe's mentioned, that's going to be in France, and very excited about this tournament coming up, and hopefully we'll talk about it all in due course.
Yeah, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about you two real quick. Joe, like I said, I think last time we spoke, I think you were like 19 years old. I'm kidding, of course.
Clubhouse, what was that?
But you've been covering a lot of sports. You've been doing Major League Rugby, soccer, cricket, football, everything. So other than the heat right now, what's been keeping you the busiest of late?
Do you know what? It's one of those kind of things where it kind of intersects perfectly. A lot of time this summer has been actually spent doing athletics. So had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to interview I think we could probably now say he is the great Noah Lyles. So when he was out here for the Diamond League, which was held at London Stadium, I was doing a stint down in the big city, and did 2 days back to back where I was speaking to him, doing lots of things about the Diamond League, and then also I think it might have been a week or two ago now, was kind of doing a lot of coverage on the World Athletics Champs that were in Budapest. So I've been keeping pretty busy with goings on the track, especially with Paris 2024 just around the corner.
Wow, a little everything. That's good. You have your toes dipped in. Yeah. Hopefully tipped in some cold ice water right now, cool you down. But Will, same with you. I mean, a lot's going on. Last time I saw you was in Chicago post MLR championship match. I know you're switching gears as far as in career and stuff. Are you still writing with Guardian? I mean, have you had some downtime?
Yes, yeah, I have. I mean, it's I'm not going to lie that the pain of that final still hurts, even when
Yeah.
you just mention it there. But no, I can't complain. I plan my exit from the game uh, in the way that I did probably a couple of years ago. But now, and look, we can probably come on to talk about how the USA are not at this World Cup. I certainly kind of wish that I was playing at this World Cup.
Yes.
But that wasn't to be. But I had an amazing time with San Diego. Unfortunately, not quite to be at the end. But as I say, I really can't complain. So I've had a bit of a sort of decompression, a bit of a reflection as to what I guess my career's been, and that's been nice just to speak to friends and former teammates, current teammates, I should say as well, and yeah, plenty of eating and drinking. I'm not going to lie. So I'm not sure how good a position I would be to take a rugby field if asked over this weekend. But hey, look, it's been nice, and I think maybe as anyone who sort of has retired will tell you, you don't get that time, during your career to reflect. But when you do, I think it's always nice. I'm excited, a bit daunted by the future, but at the same time, yeah, this is on my terms, decision I made, and so I can't complain.
All right, so Will, since I still have you on, let's jump right into it. I want to talk generally a few teams before we really dig into certain things with the World Cup. When you're looking at, say, England, New Zealand, or Australia, Wales, who's having the tougher time right now, and should they be worried?
Gosh, yeah, you know what? This World Cup, I mean, if I'm going to put sort of a nice sort of surrounding statement in all of this, it is completely wide open. I think teams coming into this tournament who we thought might be in form as to, a few years ago are not. And then there are another few teams who are really coming into what I would perceive as where you want to be coming to the World Cup, which is just confident. I think some of the teams you mentioned there, the likes of Australia, Wales, and then, of course, England, I have to comment on them. I don't think confidence is going to be running through their veins coming into that first game or their first game this weekend. Mm-hmm. However, whatever's gone before, I really do believe means zero. And I can say that from experience. 2019 with the US Eagles, I think we peaked too early. We play in that Pacific Nations Cup, which was in the sort of July and August time. And we just lost out to the Japanese in the end, coming second in that competition, beating Samoa, beating Canada convincingly as well. And then I felt when we got to the tournament, it was almost like, we just hit the notes too soon.
Yeah.
And then we came to perform, we didn't quite, hit our potential. So, I'm a big believer in whatever's happened before in this pre-World Cup build-up kind of means nothing until when you hit the pitch for game one.
Right.
So, Will, staying on that point, if you're a Welsh fan, should you be concerned with everything going on there? Is crisis a right word to say?
I don't know, Fitzy. I don't know, because first of all, when I look at that Welsh team, which has literally just come out for those viewers or those who have maybe kept an eye on the social media of Rugby World Cup, it's got a lot of quality and it's got some experience. And particularly, I look at the likes of someone like Dan Biggar at number 10, who's coming into what will be his last World Cup, his last appearances in a Welsh jersey. With a man like him at the helm, I kind of feel like they can be guided all the way through their group to be top seeds. Equally, I have talked about coming in with a lack of confidence. And then when you look at the other sides in their group, Australia, you don't know whether they're going to hit form or not. Fiji, who we can talk about being as well. I think we all want Fiji to do well. We know what they're capable of, or certainly English fans will know what they're capable of. And then even the Georgians and Portuguese. US fans don't need to talk too much about the Portuguese. We get sort of horrible shivers down our spine. But everyone's competitive in that Welsh pool. I personally think, and I've just written a piece about what I predict on these group stages, I think the Welsh will get out of that group, and I think they'll top it, much to others may not agree with me. But I just think they have got experience in the right areas, and they've got Warren Gatland, who I do believe is a top-quality head coach. I see them doing all right.
Yeah, well, I want to talk a little bit more about the article you wrote in the Guardian. And Joe, I got a question for you next after this. But Will, you talked a little bit about the underdogs and that gap between Tier 1 and Tier 2 nations growing a little bit smaller, which is good to see. Some of the underdogs you mentioned, Fiji, Georgia, Portugal, Chile, could all get some World Cup victories, which obviously would be big for their domestic games. But out of that group there, is there one nation you're particularly pulling for where you'd like for them to try and get their first, say, or outside maybe Fiji, get their first Rugby World Cup win?
Well, again, I've just said it, Fitzy, which is probably going to break some US fans. And as I say, I say this through gritted teeth. I'd like to see Portugal do well. I love the way how they play. I love the way how they've got these exciting back three players. Gudez, I think that's how you pronounce it. Apologies if I've got that wrong. But the fullback is just lightning and got electric feet. I mentioned him in my article because I do believe he could be one of those stars that people are not aware of. And then he goes on and suddenly gets signed up by Toulouse or Toulon because he just cuts teams apart with his footwork and speed. I look at their group and I genuinely believe, and I would have said the same, obviously, as a US Eagle, that I can see them pulling out a win. And I don't know where it will be. It could be that they go and just outplay Georgia with their pace and skill. It might even be that Fiji just are exhausted when they put all their efforts into other games and they just sort of take their eye off a game against Portugal, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, I honestly, I would love to see Portugal get a first Rugby World Cup win in their history. I think that would really sort of, I don't know, I just think be such a different thing that we don't expect and be brilliant for the tournament if they do.
Joe and Will, feel free to either one of you guys weigh in on this. I mean, there's a number of great storylines coming into this Rugby World Cup. I think one of the ones that I got a real good chuckle out of was maybe this is just South Africa having a little bit of fun with us, but their 7-1 split on the bench that they were chatting about. Is that just Rassie having a good laugh with us, trying to take attention away from the team and lighten the mood a little bit, or is that really serious?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good one. I hadn't thought of that one as that's a good point. But the thing is, it's Rassie, and like we saw in 2020, 2021 during the Lions tour, he was, kind of doing whatever he was doing on social media. Maybe I shouldn't delve too much into that. There's probably things that I'll have forgotten about that I might talk about. But even today, you might have seen this that was circulating doing the rounds. He's only following one account on Twitter at the minute, on his personal Twitter account, and he's following the Scotland team. So it's already started. It's always. Right. He might have changed it. Yeah. So it's always kind of going with him, and he sort of really sparks into life when there's these big tournaments, doesn't he? Because I think I remember 2021. No one ever saw of him as that sort of kind of character that's going to go brash out there, play the mind games, do all those sorts of things. The next thing we knew, we had this completely different perspective of who this bloke was. And there is always going to be that. There's always going to be that gamesmanship. I think particularly when I, was at a lot of Eddie Jones press conferences, you saw a lot of the time what you're trying to do. It's kind of a bit of it's a bit of a game of chess. You're trying to move everything into the position to be the way you want it. You want to create that narrative around your team that's going to help them, but then also shield them if things don't necessarily go well. And by hook or by crook, Eddie did that badly. He did that well. I'm still not exactly sure. I think it's a bit like, I always kind of describe it as a bit of an abusive relationship. You're not really sure where you stand on it, even after all this time. So he, Rassie is always going to do that sort of thing. But it's great, and it adds to the spectacle. It adds to the entertainment. And don't get me wrong, I think we're all tremendously excited for a World Cup to kick off tomorrow evening. But yeah, Rassie's playing the games, and I love it. And also, the thing is, fundamentally with the 7-1 split, I think someone tweeted about it or commented on it. It's actually not illegal. So it's not illegal unless it's written down that you have to have a prerequisite number of back. I mean, the game's the game. Even Argentina for England, they've gone 6-2 on the bench. So it's quite people are thinking about this. Maybe someone's going to push it over the edge at some point. I'm quite hopeful, to be honest.
Joe, let's touch on England for a second again. When they dropped that match a couple weeks ago, losing Owen Farrell for a couple weeks suspension after that came back. We're possibly losing Joe Muller as well, but he's fine. Were any issues as far as maybe in your circle were people a little worried?
Of course, but I feel like with the worry with England, and this could be, you know, and there is this sort of English sort of confidence and brashness to what I'm about to say, in that by the time the Fiji result came around, everyone was sort of leveling, was sort of grounding out. So, you know, the results had fallen off a cliff. Like even, you know, even last autumn when people were booing Eddie at Twickenham and booing the team off the turf after they lost to South Africa in that game, things weren't great. My last England game at Twickenham was when they lost to France pretty heavily. Mm-hmm. And then to not see the growth or the development of this Steve Borthwick England, and, you know, he came in very strong with what he said, and it was, you know, I want to, you know, to have an England team that's proud, that makes England proud. To then be at this point now where, you know, even the win over Wales wasn't, you know, hugely convincing. That was the game that Farrell got his red card in. You know, there's always going to be this sort of, there's this expectation with England, and there's this sort of arrogance, I think is possibly the best way of putting it, that's sort of innate with any England fan, that, you know, we should be beating certain nations. But when Fiji were doing what they were doing, and, you know, I think, for example, the biggest line that we've always talked about with a lot of the Pacific Island teams and a lot of Tier 2 nations is that if they just get it together, actually they will give these teams a good go. And with Fiji, it's always been discipline and line out. And then, you know, you bring in Sam Atavesi, who I think in the Premiership, he was operating at over 90% line-out completion rate as a hooker. So, you know, you get that piece, and then you kind of just introduce a few other things. And, you know, obviously, you know, new head coach has come in and obviously really galvanised them as well. Then it doesn't come as a surprise when this England team is taking... Well, actually, I was about to say one step forward, two steps back. I don't think there's been really that many steps forward. But... so by the time it actually happened, it didn't feel like a big surprise. And then also you then have to contend with, oh yeah, Owen Farrell's out for a couple of games. And then you turn around, and then next thing you know, Billy Vunipola's out for a couple of games. And it doesn't add up well. And I've literally just done my office sweepstake. Well, we've gone around and picked names out of a hat. I've got Ireland, by the way. I'm very pleased. And, you know, when you know, the person pulled out England, there was a groan around the room, because everyone knows that that's either going to be a run all the way to the final, because 2019, it was sort of a similar narrative in a way, or out of the group stage, which is the 2015 narrative. So there's mixed feelings. There's always that thing in your head where you're going to go, it could happen. But that realization that the results and the downward spiral has been downward and consistently downward, to the point that you do sit there and go to yourself, I don't see a positive result coming from this.
Right. Listeners here on the Twitter app, if you'd like to come up and ask a question of our guests tonight or today, you can do so by requesting on the bottom left of your app. We'll get you up here as soon as we can, and go ahead and ask your own question. And when you're done asking, we'll drop you back down into general population. No offense, just trying to clean it up here. But come on up, ask a question. You know, Will, I want to jump to you real quick. Scheduling. If I remember correctly, in 2019, there were teams that maybe had 4 days between matches. Was that correct? Remember that at all?
Yeah, I can indeed. And having been part of that as well, we finished with Tonga in Osaka. And look, you know, I can say this now, but I'm not taking anything away from Tonga beating us that day, and they deservedly did in the end. But yeah, we had a very hard-fought game against Argentina just outside Tokyo, and anyone who's been to Japan, I mean, it's amazing the system, how you travel out there, bullet train or whatever it might be. But yeah, it was literally hard game against Argentina, turn it around, and then we just had a captain's run pretty much before we played against Tonga in that last game. We were up, I remember, by about in the 55th or 60th minute. I felt like we were pretty in control, and then I could just feel a sense of just loss of energy. And look, you know, as I say, loads of if, buts and maybes from our campaign in 2019. I do believe we should have won that game. And I do also think World Rugby probably heard back from a bunch of the nations and say, hey, look, we can't have that again. So actually, when you look through the schedule now, 2023, even the likes of, you know, Portugal, who were the last to qualify, they will get 7-day turnarounds. I think one of the only teams, which is very unfortunate, and I know some people will think, you know, that's a bit biased, towards the bigger nations or whatever, your top 10 nations, but I think Samoa, they have one of the toughest turnarounds. I think they have a maximum 6 day, if not more, 5 day. Yeah, 5 or 6 day turnarounds for their games, which I do think will be tough. France, as Joe knows, anyone who's been to France is very well connected with the rail system. I'm sure they'll use that as much as obviously potentially flying as well. But it's not easy, and I think the coaches, they got to get it right in terms of what preparation is done during the week, not overdoing training, because you need to keep your players fresh. And I think whoever gets that right and uses their squad well, or should I say as best as possible, those are the teams that get through or are able to get through the group stages without having to, play with niggles, play with injuries, some of their best players not maybe getting rested, and therefore enable them later on in the tournament to hopefully give their best shot.
And I did notice there's actually one or two teams that have 2 weeks between matches, and not for everybody.
Wow.
That seems, I may have read it wrong, but it seems a little unfair, let's say. Maybe for everyone else it has 7 days at most, and I'm not sure how they're working that out. I'm not sure why that would even be. But that's got to be, I mean, that's great for the bones, but that's going to be difficult as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you want continuity, I mean, I'm contradicting myself now, but you do want continuity, and you do want that sort of feeling of like you're in a season. You're playing every week, you're continuing your form, and that will potentially cause a little bit of an issue. But at the same time, look, these guys are all conditioned and ready to go, and they'll be chomping at the bit. If anything, the issue will be more for the individual just wanting to get out there and play. So, yeah, I think schedules have been learnt on from the past. I think World Rugby's done well to sort of make sure that we don't have those 4-day turnarounds, as you were saying earlier. And I think, therefore, across the board, you'd have to say that everyone's playing a fair tournament on that regard.
Right.
Sorry, Will, Joe, moving on over to pool play a little bit more. Well, you mentioned, again, the gap is closing, but there seems to be, Ireland, France, South Africa, New Zealand, pretty safe picks to make it out of pool play. Any other nations you think will make it out of pool play pretty safely?
Well, you know what, Fitzy, I've literally just wrote just a bit of fun for a blog post on my website, which will come out just after this. Shameless plug there, by the way.
Sneak peek, I like it.
Yeah. And I just thought I just put together through maybe a bit of my experience as to who I think will who do well, come out of the group, key players to watch. I realise I'm really biased towards fly halves, which is, well, that's probably understandable. But I don't think there'll be any upsets in terms of the teams that come out of the quarterfinals. However, come out of the pools into the quarterfinals. However, what I do believe, when I look across the games in those pools, some of those games are just madness. Like, they're going to be so competitive. And I also do believe, for example, I say, if you look at, Pool C, when you've got Wales, Australia, Fiji, Georgia, and Portugal, I honestly believe Wales will win that. And I think Wales will do it because they will beat Australia in the end. They'll get run close by Fiji. But then I can see Fiji beating Australia, then Georgia beating Fiji, but then Portugal beating Georgia. I really do think that. And I think it will come down, in all honesty, to points difference in some of these pools. For example, Pool B with South Africa, Ireland, Scotland, Tonga, and Romania. No disrespect to the Romanians. I think everyone will get a 5-point win against them. But like, Tonga now are a team you've got to be wary of. Scotland have got an attack that arguably might be one of the best of the World Cup. So I actually think, I predict, just so people can go and have a look, is I think South Africa will win the group, but I don't think they'll win every game. I can see Ireland beating South Africa, but then Scotland beating Ireland, for example, but then South Africa demolishing Scotland. I honestly don't see potentially really anyone winning every game in their pool. The only team that I feel may do that now, or two teams actually, as to say, is I think New Zealand, because I think France are missing a key component to their team, which is Dante inside centre for the French. I think he's such a go-forward player for France. Missing him tomorrow night is going to be huge, and I genuinely believe that could be the difference between the All Blacks winning and France winning. And therefore, New Zealand beat France tomorrow night. They go and win every game in their pool. And the other one, which England fans are going to hate me for saying this, but as it stands, Joe, I don't know whether you agree. You can come in on this, but I genuinely see Argentina. I see Argentina beating England and therefore I see Argentina winning every game in their group, England still going through, and because of my predictions, by the way, England end up playing Wales in the quarterfinal because Wales are top the group. England will come runner up. Yeah, what do you think to England not beating Argentina on Saturday?
The thing is, I have agreed with everything that you said. I've stood in this car park just nodding away with everything that you've just said because I agree because it feels like this World Cup, for some reason, whatever reason, it just feels like you can go and look at teams and you can look at a matchup and go, well, that's why they're going to beat them. That's why they're going to beat them. That's why they're going to lose. And that's why that one player might have a good game and pick up a good contract later on. So, like,
yes.
There is always that with World Cups as well, which is either a good thing or a bad thing. I'm still not sure. You know, I think, you know, that Argentina team has looked very settled now for probably, I want to say the last year and a half. That seems like the right sort of barometer for how kind of settled and well they've looked. You know, and obviously I saw their selections today. They've gone 6 on the bench. They're obviously really targeting this England game as the one to win. I'm more than confident that they'll back themselves to, you know, to beat Japan, to beat Chile, to beat, and then of course Samoa as well. So I fully believe that. And I think for England, it's, you know, they're very much the wounded animal in this game. And I know wounded animals can be dangerous and things like that, but I really feel like they have that much to work on and work out. And especially when you look at some of those selections that have been made, for example, Johnny May, for example, not actually in the original 33-man squad, now starting on the wing against Argentina. It does seem kind of contradictory to some of the things that have been going on beforehand. So, yeah, that Argentina team is in absolute prime position not tomorrow night, sorry, I forgot what day of the week it was, on Saturday night to... Saturday. It's Saturday, I believe, at 8 p.m. UK. So for anyone really wondering, so that's obviously then that's East Coast. That's 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So by the way, I don't work for any broadcasters, but if any do, I can basically reel off the times. But yeah, so I completely agree with that, and I think, you know, I suppose even for England, they've kind of their pool is a bit front loaded in that sense that they've got, you know, Argentina, then Japan. So it does become, you know, that is obviously quite an interesting sort of matchup and start for them, because if they don't really show much good against Argentina, that Japan team might start turning around and think to themselves, oh, do you remember 2015? That was quite good. Do you want to do that again? So, yeah, I completely agree with absolutely everything that Mr. Hooley has said.
Well, I think, by the way, I have written off in what I wrote as well. I've written off a team like Japan, which is crazy because, you know, ultimately it's still good. Great. You know, they've got some great players, but they're coming into the tournament with, let's be honest, compared to 4 years ago, nothing. And I almost feel like I've wrote off Scotland. And by the way, like, you haven't even talked about the Italians. The Italy teams come on leaps and bounds. But because of the way the groups are, it's really exciting for you know, us kind of just, what do you call us? We're just sort of fans of this tournament, aren't we? We're not supporting anyone as a whole. You might have your ones you prefer, but the you know, the Italians have found themselves in a horrible group with France and New Zealand. Yeah, they could easily turn up and beat potentially the French if they suddenly go to pot, throw their toys out the pram because they lose tomorrow night in New Zealand. I mean, it could be an England 2015 for them. And then we're all going, what is happening? Now, I want to just put a side note before I finish. I do want to see France do well. I do want to see them do well because I think it'll be so important for the tournament. Rugby economics, I think it'll be so important for. And I just know, I mean, being in Japan for the 2019 World Cup, because the Japanese were doing well, the whole spirit and people in Japan just was so behind the tournament. And I would love that to be the case in France as well. I just think it's so important for a Rugby World Cup.
Yeah, of course. And obviously just on Will's, sorry, I know I'm interrupting, but just on Will's sort of mentioning of Italy there, like, the thing is that he's quite right. They have been absolutely dealt a really rubbish hand. But I suppose the thing is with them, they are still have a squad that is young enough so that in 4 years' time, they will have lots more experience together, because I don't really see the kind of the skeleton of that team changing that much. So you know, it's one of those in 4, maybe even 5 years' time, you know, say they do well at the next tournament, that's the little kind of sequence at the start before the game. It's saying, you know, 4 years ago, this Italy team wasn't really up to much, but now look at them, look what they've done in the meantime. So, you know, he's quite right. But I mean, I suppose with these things, we always, you know, we kind of look. I always look a bit further ahead, and they could well have some pieces in there that are massively influential for when it comes to Australia in 2027.
Brilliant. All right, let's jump to our first listener. Our old friend here, Ryan Kirby, has been waiting patiently. And Ryan, don't you dare ask him who they think is going to win the whole thing.
Wow. Okay. Well, there goes my question for the day. Thanks, guys. Well, Joe, hey, always glad to hear you guys come on. And Bill, John, thank you guys so much for always doing this. You guys are honestly the best. This question, well, Joe, whoever wants to answer, you guys are more than welcome to. Both awesome. Two really quick questions. One, I know you guys talked about Japan a little bit. I honestly think Japan might be a dark horse in this. Where do you guys see just like Japan themselves in this position with the Rugby World Cup? And then my second question is, you know, you guys were talking about injuries and stuff, but we forgot one big one, Romain Atomic. I know he's out for France, and that's a big blow. Do you think that's going to affect anything on the French side?
Wow, I mean, Will can take the fly half questions. That's. Oh my goodness me, I'm not taking fly half questions.
Sure, Ryan's got the door because he's obviously got someone coming round. I don't know whether yeah, it's a delivery, isn't it? Oh, good on him. Oh, look, I mean, look, for Intermac to be missing out is huge for France because they've had a lot of continuity going into this tournament with Dupont playing with Intermac for the majority of those test matches. However, I mean, the strength and depth for France is ridiculous. You've got Mathieu Jalibert, who, again, my pronunciation on my French is not the best, Jalibert, who is phenomenal. And in fact, he is pretty much an identical player as Intermac is. He's quick. He's got a good tactical kicking game. He loves to attack the line himself. And the one thing which I will really say, which you'll see with the French, is when Dupont makes a sniping run and gets in behind teams, it's usually the fly half who's actually just off his shoulder. So Intermac usually gets those kind of breaks through the middle. Well, that's going to be Jalibert, and I have no doubt with the pace that he's got, he will still make those breaks, if that makes sense. So I've been quite technical for listeners on that. But he is, in my opinion, still a quality player. I therefore don't see it being a huge loss to France, Intermac. Because also, in terms of their goal kicking options, Jalibert isn't their number one kicking option. I know Ramos is a sensational goal kicker. The other fullback as well is a top quality goal kicker. If we're going to talk about quickly, sorry, I want to say fly half. I will come on. Sorry, Brian, this is completely not what you just said. But Intermac is a loss. But for example, Muntz, who's the fly half for Fiji, now he is an incredible loss. So that's the difference I'm trying to say. Is like France, I think, can get away with not having Intermac playing. Joe, fire away about the Japan question.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, I was never going to answer a question about fly half, having never played there, and I have to defer to certain people's better judgment there. On the Japan thing, so I've seen Japan play, I think, twice in the flesh. This is when I found out it's been a few more than that, and I've forgotten about a few more times. But yeah, so one time I saw them when they played the British and Irish Lions in Edinburgh, and the other time was when I saw them play England last autumn. Both times, I have to say, I was fairly disappointed. It felt like since 2019, they hadn't really developed the squad that much. And also, in addition to that, the drop-off between the kind of the first string then and what is the first string now is fairly significant. And when I talk about, squad development, they are one of the, I think, actually, if I was to look at this, and I believe I'm right in saying this, they're actually one of the older average age squads. So, whilst they have plenty of experience, actually they're possibly on the high end of that kind of peak performance that you'd be looking for from a team that's going to make a serious sort of surge into the playoffs and go a bit further on. So it's kind of one of those. It feels like it's a bit of a weird place for that. I mean, I'm pretty certain someone might have to pick me up on this. The hooker Shota Hori, I believe he's 37 or 38. So when he was 34 last Rugby World Cup, I distinctly remember him making line breaks for fun. I don't necessarily believe that he would have that in his locker again. So you do lose something there, and I don't know. I'm not blown away with them in the same way that I was. But does that mean that I don't think there could be a pretty poor England team on their day? That's a different matter entirely. But sorry, just hiccup. But I do think that they are. yeah, they're a good team. They're not the best team. They're not the best versions of themselves. So it's difficult to kind of work out where they are. But I mean, I still think they could pick up a surprise win along the way.
Joe, since you got you here, this weekend, first round matches were about, 26, 27 hours away from the first match. If you were to choose a match that will be an upset this weekend, who do you think it would be? Does Namibia have a chance over Italy? Does, I don't know why I wrote down Argentina over England, which technically isn't because they're higher in the rankings, but, can Fiji topple Wales? What matches do you think would be the one, that could happen?
There's the question of the weekend. The thing is, I feel like anything I say will leave me with egg on my face, basically.
That's why I asked
you're quite right about it. Yeah.
I'll go Chile.
That would be, to be fair, kind of in the scope of US. I think that would maybe kind of justify a few things. But yeah, let's have a good kind of delve into this. I mean, I think personally, the one I'd love to see, and this is very much a personal preference. This is very much something that I've been thinking about quite consistently for the last couple of weeks. That Fiji Wales game is something I've got my eyes on very kind of sternly. Like I don't think Romania are going to upset the apple cart and beat Ireland. I don't think, I don't think other teams are going to do it. I think Italy will unfortunately I think they'll hammer Namibia, and that's even with the two New England Free Jacks guys in there. I mean, we could even talk about why isn't Laroon Milan starting, but that's a different matter entirely. That's something I thought when I saw the team sheet. But that Fiji game is the one I've got my eyes on, just purely for the fact that they, the development. But again, Will's right. Caleb Munt's been out is catastrophic, and like for him to also, with that being a knee injury, I don't necessarily know when we might even see him play rugby again. I think he's probably going to miss the vast chunk of this next season. So, we might not see him actually again until next summer, basically. Wow. So, but obviously no one's really said the extent. But when someone says knee injury, it's serious. You think to yourself 9 months, and you think about that sort of period. So I'm going to have to say Fiji Wales, just purely maybe because I'm English a little bit. Maybe because I really like that Fiji team. I think I've always loved that Fiji team in a way. So I'm going to have to say Fiji Wales.
Well, Joe and Will. So, well, go ahead. I think you were about to.
No, I was just gonna add on there. I mean, there's no Welsh in me. I've always had highly competitive games against whether that be Wales age groups in the past or Welsh teams. There's no I have a lot to say that I would say I would dislike Wales. I wouldn't want to see them do well, but I genuinely see them actually turning the corner in this tournament. I really do. And then to add on to my point I have already made, Joe's just made it again. I feel like Fiji losing Muntz is the difference between them not making the quarterfinals, between them making the quarterfinals or not. I think he's that pivotal to them. I really do. He sort of sits in this middle ground between what Fiji always needed, which was someone who controls, but then also the license to still kind of work with his mavericks that are around him. I just think he was so pivotal for them, and he was played so well at Twickenham the other week. It is. I'm really unfortunate to say they've lost him. They're not making the quarterfinals. That's my prediction.
I love it, guys. As we're talking sleepers and underdogs, we hinted on this a little bit, but I've got to ask: is there a Brighton miracle this year? Is there going to be the World Cup's 2015 Japan team? And if so, who is that this year, do you think?
I'll go ahead and say, again, I actually wrote this down and then hit the backspace quite hard because I was like, no, that's unfair. That is unfair. But we talked about Fiji, about, the potential. I understand that, but I will stick with what I said about, I just don't know. They'll do something. I mean, Fiji will maybe they could easily beat Wales. They could easily beat Australia. So I don't want to take that away from them. But here's my wild one. I genuinely think Georgia have the potential to beat Wales or Australia. I don't think they'll do both.
Yeah.
But I genuinely believe Georgia have the ability to. I mean, they beat Wales back in November last year. Any Welsh fan's going to remember that. And I just feel like set piece is crucial. They have got a brilliant set piece, and they've got the ability to control the game as well with their halfback. So, yeah, that I don't know if that's quite as big as the Brighton miracle. I don't know, but it's I do see the Georgians potentially pulling something out of the bag, and as I say, causing a giant. Well, in my opinion, would be a giant killer. Whatever, I've lost my train of thought. A giant win in Pool C.
Yeah, that's a really. To be fair, that is a really kind of. I think I don't know if Will would maybe agree with this. I don't know if everyone would agree with me with this, but it feels like we've always had this sort of conversation about Georgia of, they're the real Six Nations team. We'll take out Italy at some point. We'll introduce a playoff. They'll play each other a couple of times and see how it goes. But recently, they really seem to kind of consolidate that sort of conversation. And then, they did beat Wales in quite. I mean, it was quite spectacular circumstances. I was in the press room at Twickenham and there were papers thrown up in the air and that sort of thing. But again, that was mainly English blokes kind of enjoying that one, I think. And that if you had to look at anything that was realistic, I suppose, I mean, I don't see Italy beating the All Blacks. I don't see Italy beating France. I don't see Italy beating France's second team at this moment in time. So if it had to turn around, you probably would look in that pool and you would turn around and say that's possibly the one where it would happen. I mean, I know 4 years ago, I think everyone was fairly unanimous in the fact that Uruguay beating Fiji was the upset of that World Cup. Mm-hmm. But I'm hoping to look a bit higher up the pecking order in sort of, I suppose, the traditional rugby sense and the sort of modern rugby sense as we look at Georgia as so many of the other countries that and so I'm talking about some countries that haven't even qualified for the World Cup this time around. I'm talking US, I'm talking Canada, that have put that infrastructure in place so that they can be more successful long term. And I would really hope to see some of that kind of investment, that passion, that because I can't even imagine to think how much hard work's gone into kind of developing those nations and making them more sort of sustainable long term. That I would love to see a Georgia team pick up a win against Wales or Australia, because Australia, let's be fair, I mean, in recent times have looked fairly dire, and I think that's where I'd be looking. I have to say that's where I'd be looking.
All right, so a couple more questions. One more listener question, and we'll get like one or two out of the way, and we'll let you guys go. Joe, we'll let you leave the car park. Will, you can go back to reading around the world in 80 minutes. So we'll let you guys go in a minute here. Coming up, Peter.
Yes, guys, can you hear me there?
Yes, sir.
Just a question for Will and Joe. I think we all can agree that the four best teams in the world here, France, Ireland, South Africa, and New Zealand at this point in time, only two of them are going to make it past the quarterfinal. So, if there's anything I could almost say negative about the World Cup, it's a pity that two of those guys won't make it past the quarters, So my question is, do you guys think or foresee that in the future with this tournament that they will be looking at making the draws for the pools in a different way or in a different stage to sort of make these things even out more? Because the way I see it, one of those two teams are going to go through. It's just a matter of who's going to step up in the other pools to compete with them. That can go actually all the way. I can see, teams like England and Australia maybe pulling off a big win, but who can actually on the other side go all the way? If you look at England last time, they played one hell of a game against New Zealand, and the following game they were easily beaten by the Box. So you got to win 2 or 3 games on the trot, quarter, semis, and final. And to me, that's put a different light on it. So, yeah, to cut a long story short, do you guys think they're going to rethink the draw? Thank you.
Peter, I'll just come in first, and I just want to first of all say I really hope that your lad Ruben is okay. I heard, unfortunately, he came off injured in a game for the Cheetahs. So sending him, my man Rubes, all the very best for his recovery on that. So I just wanted to say that first. In answer to your question, very simply, yes, I think they probably will, because of what you just said. in terms of you want the best teams playing each other probably at the back end of the tournament, don't you? Semi-final, final. Although actually how it's lined up is France or New Zealand could very much, I think, play South Africa or Ireland in the final. So I would say those are the top 4 teams, and they could potentially meet in the final. So that still can happen. I think it makes the group stages, though, so fascinating. And when I think of rugby and I think of how rugby wants to be a brilliant product at the moment, we want to be, engaging with fans and having these quality games early doors. And you're going to see that on the first week. I mean, it's ridiculous that France decided that they wanted to play New Zealand because the French, by the way, they decided they actually can make the choice as the host nation who they play first. So Japan, understandably, played Russia in their first game 4 years ago, probably because they thought they were going to, and they did win. France have gone, no, screw it. We're going to face our number one side, or the side they think is going to be their highest challenge, first up in the first game, New Zealand, which I just think is brilliant, obviously, for an onlooker or a fan to see every pool game, it seems, something's up for grabs, and it could be literally down to the final games of the pool. And then the quarterfinals, I mean, it's madness, isn't it? I mean, you could end up in the way that I predicted it. I'm predicting that actually South Africa are going to play France in the quarterfinal. New Zealand are going to play Ireland. It's so hotly competitive. I do think World Rugby will maybe have a look. They shouldn't be really booking places 3 years in advance. I imagine, I don't know whether 2027 will be, but I think also you're going to have maybe a few extra teams at the World Cup. So it might be that everything gets turned on its head. It'd be interesting to see their judgment on that. But I do think as it stands at the moment, it's going to be a hell of a competition from literally day one.
Yeah, and Will's definitely right, because the thing is, I think there was a period over this Six Nations where we were talking about Ireland and Scotland in the same pool. That is just, crackers, because obviously that Scotland team was performing really well. I think, especially kind of tail end last year as well, they were up there. They were performing brilliantly week in, week out. And to then think that, I know obviously we know this happens anyway, that the competition is going to get more and more diluted, and then you're going to be left with the cream of the crop, so to speak. And everyone understands that, but the fact that, some pretty big nations that could miss out, or they might be out by the quarterfinals, that feels, it's a little bit heartbreaking, isn't it? Because you want to see the best teams compete all the time, and there's going to be teams that, there might be a team that kind of slips through or sneaks through, and you think to yourself, they're just going to be out. They might even lose by 50 in the quarters or something like that, and that is a little bit hard. I mean, I think I sort of understand the logic behind doing it the way World Rugby have done. I think they just want to make sure that people can book things in advance, that, they don't want to, make things more sort of valuable in a way. I suppose if you do things close to the time, that means the hotels are going to be far more expensive for people to book on. And there's that economic aspect that comes with it as well. So there is a certain logic to what they're doing, but also from a competition perspective, it doesn't necessarily lend itself well. I mean, there might even be the perspective that at some point, you say you take top 4 nations. This is pure speculation, but there is a perspective where you take your top 4 nations in the world at that one time, and then you just put one of them in each pool, and you start building in and around that before you properly sort of do everything. But then also, having said that, there is a pitfall there, because there's a certain amount of nations that have already qualified that you're not actually placing anywhere, and then everyone else is going to turn around going, well, gosh, I'm not going to quite do this anytime soon. But there does have to be the conversation, because it is quite hard to look at, especially when you look at the schedule and you think to yourself, gosh, it's, I think, as Will mentioned, South Africa could be playing France, and imagine quarterfinals, South Africa play France, South Africa win, then there's going to be there could be more riots on the streets. So there is that sort of that angle where you think to yourself, there does have to be a conversation about how it moves going forward.
Well, guys, we're getting to that point in the show where what question is coming next. So the favorites, there seems to be 4 or 5 that have a shot at winning the Webb Ellis Cup. So I got to ask, who are your picks to make it to the finals, and who's winning the whole shebang?
I'll come out of the blocks first, and I think South Africa. I think South Africa will, because when it gets into the knockout stages, what they have and their game plan around what they have is kind of knockout rugby anyway in how they play the game, and they've got the X factor across the board, and they got the strength and depth. So if there are injuries in the competition, I don't think it will affect them too badly. Their big thing is going to be, in my opinion, their quarterfinal. I do think they'll get out their group. I think they could potentially slip up. They might even have a loss against Ireland, as I predict, as you'll find out in my article. I think Ireland will lose to Scotland. So I don't think it's going to be straightforward, but I do think once they get into the knockout stages, they just come alive. That's when they just know what to do. And Razzie, of course, knows what to do. So I predict, if you're going to say who's going to win it, South Africa. Who do I want to win it? Other than I would, of course, like to see England win it. I would love to see the French. I would love to see the French, but I do think South Africa will win it.
Yeah, it's difficult to disagree. Sorry, with a lot of what Will said. That would be bucking the trend there if I said that one. I think if I said who I want to win it, I would say France. It's sort of been that fairy tale story from the start 4 years ago when we started seeing kind of the building blocks put in place for the team that we now see. But I am always going to have those sort of reservations around them because of injuries. I mean, I'd actually go as far to argue that the loss of Paul Willemse is actually more significant than Roman Ntamack, purely for the fact that it feels like there is a drop off there. Like, you know, they picked 3 lock forwards consistently for a vast period of time, and then to lose the main one, because Thibaut Clement was kind of still a relatively new introduction in contrast to Willemse, then I'm worried more that, you know, that they're going to have more of a drop off, and that would then therefore put advantage to South Africa. But do you know what I'm going to do? Because as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, and if people weren't kind of here, and I mentioned my work sweepstake, I'm going to back the world's #1 ranked side in Test rugby, and I'm going to say Ireland are going to make it past the quarterfinals and finally get their hands on that golden trophy thing that kicks around once every 4 years.
Wow. You don't think Ireland's too old for that, huh?
No, I think they're good. I think they're right where they need to be. They've got a good blend of young talent coming through. They've also got, you know, that kind of dogged experience of Johnny Sexton getting his first run out.
If they lose Johnny Sexton, they're done.
Well, they're not going to lose him, because even if he gets a ban again, he'll be back by the next game. So it's sort of like, you know,
and there it is.
Yeah. They'll play a midweek kind of warm-up, semi-official test against Portugal. They'll be fine.
Will? No, that's all right.
No, he makes a brilliant point. I just stay quiet there.
Had to be done. It had to be done. Work sweepstake, by the way. But I have to say this: cash is on the line, so I need this.
I'll make some phone calls.
I've got to back him. Thank you. But no, yeah. So I mean, I love the way that they've been trending. I love the way that they've been developing over the years. I love that defense that Andy Farrell's installed. There's a lot more of them to like than just the sweepstake stuff, and they've slowly become this team that everyone slept on, because we've got to the big day and everyone's talking about France are host. They've been on this tremendous journey. The All Blacks are always going to be in it. Springboks are obviously naturally going to be in it as well, because they are the holders and they have been some of the most consistent performers in the Rugby World Cup's history. But if you look at a team that's kind of really been trending and developing and going in the right direction for the best part of 4 years, you do then have to look at Ireland as the team that's kind of been consistent with it when others necessarily haven't. I do agree about of course I agree with the Johnny Sexton point, but I feel like they already have their plan in place about how to manage him, and they're not going to overcook him this weekend. They're not going to overcook him the game after that. They're going to make sure that they get themselves in the right place pretty quickly.
Well, gentlemen, Joe Harvey, Will Hooley, this past hour has been brilliant. Thank you both so much for joining us, and good luck in your office sweepstakes.
Thanking you.
Cheers, guys. Appreciate it. All the best to you.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure. Get some sleep tonight. It's a long month and a half. All right, boys. All right, everyone else, thank you, man. That's been a blast. You know, Fitzy, I didn't ask you who you think's going to win.
I'm backing Joe here. I'm pulling for Ireland, and that's not only because that's where the heritage comes from with Fitzpatrick, but I think it would be a great story, and I totally get it. France is host nation; it would be a nice little fairy tale there. But
Yeah, 100%.
nothing against South Africa or New Zealand or England or Australia, but anyone who hasn't won it before, that's who I'm pulling for. But let's go Chile as well.
I got to pick South Africa only because Peter De Haas has my number, and I have a feeling he'll call me if I don't say that. Either way, I'm pumped. I'm getting ready. I'm having friends over tomorrow. I can't wait for this whole thing to start. But with that said, let's wrap it up, guys. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in live. If you're online on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, thank you so much for listening. This show will be released as a podcast later today. Listen to it later if you missed part of it or missed all of it, and get ready for the World Cup. Happy Rugby World Cup Eve, everybody, and good day.